Oh, hey guys. Yeah, I know it's been a while, but I feel like after I got this comment, I feel like now is as good as time as ever to talk about the one and only Scott the Blue Lego 3F. Ah, yes, Scott the Blue Lego 3F, or if I recently dubbed him, the Streamlined Scotts. Now, as we all know, I have always liked the Jinty model, but I also like smaller and simplified models. So, when I first sought out to build my first Jinty model, this video, there's a reason why I didn't add the firebox. Now, there were two reasons for me showcasing this model. One was because Jinty Bricks Railway had actually seen, or I'd asked him, like, would you want to see my Jinty model? And he was like, sure. And I was like, okay, I'll showcase it. But the second reason being because I remember it vividly. I wanted to make a Thomas model because I never made a proper one. But oh, buddy boy, as times have changed, this guy has captured the hearts of millions, and I'm so glad a lot of people really like this locomotive. So thank you all so much. Now, let's actually get into the build process of this locomotive. Now, this is the oldest photo I think I ever have of Scott, and wow, he looks so much more different than like how he does now. Parts to note with this model are the splasher placements, the dome in center with the Technic beam, the bunker, and the cab not being fully painted just yet. And just how squashed everything looks. Actually, this is not the oldest photo I have. I've just recently found this photo again. And yeah, no, the buffers are rounder, looking like bins. The funnel is significantly taller, and the placement actually is inverted, along with the side rods being Technic built, the wheels eventually being Montana's, and the whistle placement. So yeah, this is an older photo. So yeah, everything I just listed, this is an even older version of him. So just wow. Now we go into this model, and you can already see he's starting to take shape, where the buffer beams are a little more wider, the whistles are now more defiant, and the funnel is pretty much the same later on in the model. Now we're just gonna move on to this photo because he didn't have his wheels because I'd given them to Montana, which will be covered in a later video. But yeah, no, he was just on a flatbed for a while because, he was transferring the wheels. But then that photo I'd previously mentioned, that's when he got his new wheels and side rods. Then in the year 2021, I had decided to give all my engines paper faces because the Lego ones just did not do them justice at all, especially since Montana's was supposed to be a significant face shape. So Scott was actually the last model I had given a face because I wanted to give him that side smirk that everyone knows and loves now. But after a while, they were just paper faces with no shading, nothing, and pretty much stayed the same for a while. This is also when I started giving the engines animation before I did that little tutorial on how to animate eyes freely instead of having to do frame by frame by frame for the animation. So yeah, that times have changed. Jumping a bit into the future, this is roughly late 2022, I want to say, where I started giving and doing a lot better in animation and editing formats. So yeah, this is when I was in my happiest, when the videos actually looked good. And if you notice, He's running on his own, and that is because I gave him the Circuit Cube. Yeah, that's what it's called. And it's literally just Bluetooth, and it's a very small motor that is not Lego, but is compatible with Lego. And oh my gosh, I love it so much. But considering the fact that I'd been busy, I took it out of Scott because I preferred him being just a free roam engine because it just made more sense to me. I prefer it anyway. And later on, if I do hopefully get more parts, I will end up getting more bits for Scott and the crew when I decide to do it, which is hopefully very soon. Now, unfortunately, I never intended to document this because this was in that stage where I was like, goodbye crew, which, for those who don't know, no, I am not getting rid of the crew. I love them too dearly to just get rid of them. So for those who still think I'm getting rid of them, no, I'm doing no such thing to the crew because they were never given a light, so I'm gonna let them shine when the time comes. And it would just become... There's a whole history, but I'm not gonna go into it right now. But things to know already is that Scott is a lot longer, along with bits of detail. For example, you've got this little bit in the front on the tanks that I just added for detail. I don't know what it is or significance would be, but I just added it because I thought it looked cool. Another thing to add is the hook, because the hook was something that I felt was naked on the model. Also, if you notice in front of Scott, there is a little like curved bit, and that is supposed to relate to the Caledonian engines, which I understand the Jintys kind of do have, but this one is more defiant on Scott, so yeah, it's the ones from the Caledonian engines. Along with that, you have lining, and then the splasher is changed. This was because originally he was supposed to have this little front bit along with the like Caledonian engines. Because I thought, you know, he's Scottish, might as well give him something different, I guess. But then I was like, no, because Lil already has this, and Scott just looks a bit more off. Although it would look nice on him, it just isn't possible with Lego. But who knows, maybe I'll give it to him later on. Now I am hoping to give him the LMS, I just haven't done it just yet. But where it stands, this is my Scott model. From the moment I built Scott, I knew for a fact I did not want him to be the same size as Thomas, because already Scott is using the normal sized wheels, or how the community, Lego community, has dubbed it, the large wheels, and already Scott is already too big as a model. So in my headcanon, I was like, nope, he is not the size of Thomas. He is a bigger sized tank engine, roughly the size of an E4 class. Before I explain bases prior to Scott, I'd like to give a headcanon of my personal take on the AU of Sodor. Most of the engines on Sodor are not the basis of the engine. Like Henry has features of a Black 5 but doesn't look like it, but is labeled as one. So in my take, Scott is labeled as a 3F Jinty, but is not a 3F Jinty, if that makes any sense. Now with headcanons out of the way, let's look at the first iterations of Scott's bases. Now, the first rendition of Scott was the Furness Railway Class G5, and at first glance, yeah, this kinda does look like Scott. The first iteration of Scott's model. After looking at this model thoroughly, I had some nitpicks about the model that I just thought didn't suit Scott's features. Things to note about this model: while the driving wheels are spaced out correctly, are too small in diameter for Scott's bases, because later on, Scott's wheels were roughly the size of the 14XX driving wheels. Another thing to note is the bunker is not the correct shape, it is too narrow and thin, and while, again, the first iteration of Scott had this, later on he did not, and I thought the bunker was just too small. Another thing to note is the cab. the cab is just too far back along with the dome. And this engine just didn't suit what I wanted because this was already too small, and a lot of people already agree that this engine could in fact be Thomas. And since Thomas is a small tank engine and I didn't want Scott to be a small tank engine, this engine out of the question. But then later on I was like, well, why not just make him a freelance model? And while I did draw the model, it looked like Audrey's original model. I was ecstatic. I was so happy to find an engine that looked just like Scott. But what was it? So I did some research and I ended up finding out that this is a standard Stewart Repath, I think I said the name right, engine. And when I saw it, I kid you not, I lost all my marbles, guys. This engine is a kit, and while I was scrolling through, I found it. I found the real-life Scott model. The only minor modifications I do would make the cab a little bigger, raise up the bunker, and give it 14XX sized wheels because, you know, bigger driver wheels. But other than that, that would be my ideal Scott. And now I have a reference, which is just amazing, you guys. It's amazing.